improving at every contest. Just keep putting on more size and also getting harder, better.
That's how a mass monster is made. That's how all the great mass monsters are made. That's how Paul Dillet was made.
There are two types of bodybuilders. Some who push the limit, and those who take it way too far. From freakish muscle size to deadly drug use, these mass monsters risked everything for the ultimate physique. So, yes, these are the bodybuilders who took it too far. And I wouldn't say that things didn't always work out well for these people. Let's kick things off with an absolute horror story from hell. Meet Tristian Barnes, a 23-year-old addicted to the grind. And while he's definitely not the biggest guy out there, when it comes to steroids, Tristian is an open book, documenting everything on YouTube. But after years of taking anabolic steroids, Barnes finally learned his lesson. The hard way. Here's what happened. Since he was taking so many steroids, his muscles ended up growing faster than his tendons, resulting in a freak injury that nearly ended his career. His pectoral muscle, or in simple words, chest muscle, detached from the bone during a workout, leaving him in excruciating pain.
I just tore my pec. I'm not joking. I just tore my pec.
Believe it or not, the 23-year-old who once used to lift hundreds of pounds couldn't even lift a cup after the devastating injury. But you'd think he's probably learned his lesson after this, right? Nope. Tristian still uses drugs and has expressed that he will continue using them until he reaches his goals. Well, I just hope we don't hear anything bad about him in the future.
Some people train at this time and then the next day they won't train. I don't like that. I need to have a set schedule every day. And I believe that's what creates success.
Next up, we have a guy who couldn't possibly get any bigger. Nick Walker, the real-life mutant. Despite being only 30 years old, Nick looks like he's been working out for 40. And this isn't a man on steroids. No, sir. This is steroids inside a man. His freak workouts are fueled by intense drug use ranging all the way from anabolic steroids, human growth hormones, and testosterone boosters. And that's just what we know. It's rumored that Nick is on a deadly cocktail of some other illegal drugs that could knock him out at any given moment. Nick might still be up and running, but his close ones mention how he struggles with personal relationships, now mainly because of all the adverse effects from the drug use, including aggression and emotional instability. Talk about dedication, though. Speaking of dedication...
Synthol, você compra tranquilo na farmácia porque não precisa de receita. Não é proibido, mas é produto para animal.
Ever heard about the Synthol man? I don't even know if I should be calling this guy a bodybuilder. It all started when Valdir Segato was just a young kid with one simple dream: to become the real-life Hulk. His obsession with size took a dark twist after he discovered Synthol, a sight enhancement oil used to increase size. Valdir went overboard, injecting himself every single day and ballooning his arms up to astonishing 23 inches. For Valdir, this wasn't about fitness or strength. It was simply about looking big. Doctors warned him that he'd end up losing his arms if he didn't stop injecting.
He's the one that has me the most worried. I need to get him to stop injecting. I don't know if I'll be able to accomplish that. I'm really, really nervous that I can't get him to.
But his obsession with fame and size got the best of him. His skin stretched thin, blood vessels strained, and muscles literally hardened as Valdir suffered a heart attack and passed away at just 55 years old. And trust me, size is the last thing he's remembered for. A lot of people in Brazil know him as the man who literally inflated himself to death. But the Brazilian Hulk isn't the only bodybuilder to lose his life to obsession.
Fitness phenom Dallas McCarver shocked the bodybuilding community today. According to TMZ Sports, the massive Olympia competitor choked on food. He was found incoherent early this morning by a friend in his home in Florida. McCarver was pronounced dead at a Florida hospital.
26-year-old Dallas McCarver suffered the same fate. While this 26-year-old definitely had an insane work ethic, I'm afraid his addiction to performance-enhancing drugs spiraled out of hand, ultimately costing him his life. Believe it or not, he wasn't even at his peak and was still well over 300 pounds of solid muscle. His training regime was absolutely brutal as McCarver spent 6 days at the gym, 3 to 4 hours per session, lifting ungodly amounts of weight. But that's not all. He was a beast at the kitchen table as well, devouring well over 10,000 calories per day.
You work so hard for so long that dreams become reality. Sometimes you get caught up in it and you just overlook it all, but when you really sit down and think that, like, man, I'm living the dream. I'm living the dream I wanted.
Literally force-feeding himself to maintain his physique. There's something else in the mix too, though. The 26-year-old was on a cocktail of drugs, being open about using insulin, steroids, growth hormones, and other PEDs. And to be fair, the signs were in front of everyone all along, like that time when he collapsed on stage during the 2017 Arnold Classic Australia. Just a couple of months after this incident, McCarver was found dead at his home, reportedly choking on food. But it was later discovered that he had a dangerously enlarged heart, severe organ damage, and a flood of drugs in his system. Seeing McCarver collapse on stage reminds me of a similar incident.
Improving at every contest. Just keep putting on more size and also getting harder, better.
That's how a mass monster is made. That's how all the great mass monsters are made. That's how Paul Dillet was made.
Remember Paul Dillet? The human freak who froze on stage. Paul Dillet wasn't just big, this guy was inhumanely massive. Standing 6 feet 1 inch and weighing well over 300 pounds, Paul was a bodybuilding icon of his time. His shredded, vein-covered physique almost made him look like a comic book character had come to life. But that massive size of his came at a cost. Along with countless hours of training, he would inhale piles of chicken, rice, and protein like it was his full-time job, digesting at least 10,000 calories per day.
He was the tallest and most huge mass monster in the bodybuilding arena. He was so huge that he would make other mass monsters like Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates look smaller standing next to him. His perfect physique, with small waist and gigantic arms, made him look the most freaking incredible beast on the stage.
But come on now, we all know the real secret was steroids and diuretics. And it backfired at the 1994 Arnold Classic as his body shut down right in the middle of posing. Paul was paralyzed on stage, unable to move, as his muscles completely locked up. If he wasn't rushed to the hospital in time, his system would have shut down, nearly costing him his life. Ready to meet another freak of nature?
Fast becoming referred to as the human Popeye, Mustafa Ismail from Egypt has just been awarded the Guinness World Record for the largest biceps, measuring in with a circumference of 25.5 inches, although they're now even bigger than that.
About 65 centimeters.
Mustafa Ismail, folks. The man with the biggest arms in the world. How big are we talking about? 31 inches around. You heard that right. This guy had arms bigger than most people's waists. But here's the million-dollar question. Was it hard work or something else? Well, Mustafa claims he spent 3 to 4 hours a day, twice a day, every day just working on his arms. And don't even get me started about his diets. He apparently ate 7 pounds of protein every single day, washing it down with 3 gallons of juice, water, and protein shakes. But let's be real here. There's no amount of chicken or curls in the world that build biceps looking like actual balloons. What do I suspect? Synthol, just like the Brazilian Hulk. He's walking proof that big doesn't always mean better. What's he up to these days? Hiding.
One of my friends, he told me like, how about if we contact Guinness for you because you have something I never saw in anyone I met in my whole life. Like you have to be like pulling stuff.
He's a laughingstock in the bodybuilding world because all he did was train biceps and nothing else.
I miss you more than anything in the world. A mother to lose their only child is the worst thing that anybody could happen to.
But here's a bodybuilder who was quite open about his drug abuse. In fact, it wouldn't be wrong to say he bragged about it. To be honest, Bostin Loyd wasn't even a bodybuilder. He was a walking experiment. He admitted to everything from using steroids, insulin, and growth hormones to injecting his muscles with Synthol. His experiments eventually got out of hand as he was stacking his body with more drugs than he could handle. It all caught up to him in 2022 as he died of a heart attack at just 29 years old. After the autopsy, it was discovered that nearly every organ in his body was about to fail, with his liver almost turning into a rock. This guy was the walking, talking definition of get big or die trying.
Oh man, doing sports with Bostin was always amazing because he pushed me to my limit. I was always a chubbier guy than he was, so like he would be like, bro, like come on, you could do it. Like he was a motivational type of person. Like me being with Bostin, and it gave me a sense of structure that I didn't have.
And then we have Chad Brothers, the definition of roid rage. There's not a lot of footage on Chad, but from what I know, he was a massive bodybuilder who took his obsession with size to dangerous limits. But he had a dark secret apart from just steroids, though. Brothers was also addicted to stimulants, also known as pre-workouts, and that led to the infamous Gold's Gym meltdown.
Remember the weightlifter who died at a Capital Region fitness center after police tasered him?
Witnesses claim Chad snapped as he went on a violent, uncontrollable rampage, destroying equipment, throwing weights, and fighting the staff. The police were called, and it actually took several tasers to bring him down. But just when everyone thought things were finally under control, Chad's heart gave out as he passed right there on the gym floor. This just goes to show you the mental effects of all these PEDs.
I weighed him in last night, the absolute picture of health. I never saw him look better. 265, huge. Ripped, dry, healthy.
Let's talk about Anthony D'Arezzo next, the bodybuilder who died for the stage. Literally. Now before I get into it, there's no denying that Anthony was a work of art. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of work it took to maintain such massive size, all while being shredded down to the bone. But behind the jaw-dropping body was a dangerous mixture of performance enhancers. Anthony relied heavily on steroids, diuretics, and stimulants to get competition ready, chasing that picture-perfect lean look. Some of the drugs he took stripped every ounce of water from his body, making his muscles pop out, almost looking unreal. But this extreme obsession of his ended up costing him his life as he suffered a fatal heart attack back in 2006 at just 46 years old. It was later revealed that dehydration had shut his body down with a heart attack, serving as the final nail in the coffin. And speaking of chasing the perfect look,
to this show with people saying, man, Gaspari looked phenomenal. Gaspari was the best shape I've ever seen him.
Here's Rich Gaspari, the legend who was a pioneer of extreme conditioning. I gotta say, during his peak, Rich looked like he was carved out of stone. I mean, this is a bodybuilder who pretty much redefined the shredded look back in the 80s and 90s. But achieving that level of leanness came with some serious dedication and consequences. Gaspari was big on cardio and worked out every single day to maintain his ultra-low body fat. Word is, he lived on just chicken, fish, and broccoli for years to maintain his leanness. But the real game changers were all the diuretics and extreme fat burners. He did eventually admit to using steroids and other PEDs, but it was his use of diuretics that nearly killed him. At one point, Rich was so dehydrated that he could barely move, with his organs at risk of shutting down. He was fortunate enough to make it out alive, but suffered irreversible metabolic damage, having to hang up the gloves for good. Quickly jumping to the next now, Ilia Golem Yefimchik. Bodybuilder, giant, or a mutant? I don't know what to call this guy after seeing his massive, freakishly large physique. He looks like a cartoon. I mean, just look at those massive 25-inch arms and 61-inch chest. It's almost like someone drew this guy. And I think we all know Ilia was abusing steroids, insulin, GHG, Synthol, and other PEDs. But did you know he was also loading up on nearly 16,500 calories per day? How can you even do that to yourself? So, what happened to him? Well, Ilia, unfortunately, died young, suffering from a heart attack at just 36 years old. I guess people never learn. And while some of these bodybuilders I've talked about so far might be new, here's a legend you've all heard of. Ronnie Coleman. The 8-time Mr. Olympia champion is known for his motto, lightweight baby. But I guess it's something he should have taken a bit more seriously. At his peak, Ronnie could squat and deadlift a massive 800 pounds and bench press 200-pound dumbbells like they were toys. And while pros like Ronnie are usually very low-key about their PED usage, I think we all know it's important to achieve a physique without them. But yeah, little did he know, he was abusing his body, as his spine collapsed after years of abuse in the gym. He's had 13 surgeries and still can't walk without assistance. What a tragic ending to such an amazing career. I guess even kings aren't invincible. Who comes to mind when I say the words prison workouts? If you're a bodybuilding fan, I'm sure you've thought of Kaylee Muscle. After being locked up for armed robbery, this guy transformed himself behind bars, using makeshift weights, body weight exercises, and sheer willpower. After coming out of lockup, his no-excuses attitude and madman training routine made him a fitness icon in no time. Behind the scenes, Kaylee was abusing pretty much any PED he got his hands on, including the usual steroids, GHGs, and stimulants. Disaster finally struck in 2021 after he suffered a near-death heart attack because of a 100% clogged artery. Doctors, to this day, believe Kai is lucky to be alive, as they spent several hours in the ER trying to save him. The outcome? Well, for once, we have a bodybuilder who learned his lesson and swore off steroids for good, preaching health over excessively large builds. And now for the 4-time Mr. Olympia, the mass monster, Jay Cutler. Jay was known for his blocky, thick waist, jaw-dropping quads, and massive arms. But getting big enough to dethrone the king, Ronnie Coleman came with a heavy price. Cutler trained twice a day, 6 days a week, attacking each muscle with intense workouts. Believe it or not, he could squat 700 pounds and leg press well over 1,000. Again, like I mentioned before, pros never admit to steroid use, but it's obvious they don't achieve their physique naturally either. And Jay can hide it all he wants, but the constant injuries, nerve damage, and long-term strain on his organs are answer enough. He's still in great shape to this day, though. I wouldn't exactly say Victor Martinez took it too far. I think calling him unlucky would be the right way to put it. I mean, let's not lie. The guy had the physique of a champion. It was a perfect mix of size, shape, and symmetry. Many people backed him to be the next Mr. Olympia, but unfortunately for Martinez, his career was plagued by setbacks, injuries, and controversies. Like that time back in 2004, when Victor got arrested for buying steroids from an undercover police officer. Damn. As a bodybuilder, that's super embarrassing. That was just his first encounter with the authorities. Victor landed in jail again in 2011 after being arrested due to some immigration issues. He did try to make a comeback, but his dream of winning Mr. Olympia never came true. What's he doing these days? Well, he has a YouTube channel guiding younger generation bodybuilders on steroids and PEDs. Next up, we have the infamous Ray McNeill and Killer Sally. McNeill had it all: insane size, shredded muscles, and a bright future in bodybuilding. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Oh, he also had a buffed wife as well, making it a match made in heaven or the gym. Behind the scenes, his life was spiraling out of control thanks to his intense steroid use, violent outbursts, and toxic marriage. It's rumored that McNeill started to load up on copious amounts of steroids and started getting chaotic episodes of rage, aggression, and paranoia. His marriage was taking the brunt of this, as physical fights and abuse started to increase. Then, in 1995, during a heated argument, Sally shot and killed Ray in cold blood, making his death one of the most infamous scandals in bodybuilding history. Now for Andreas Munzer, the man without skin. Munzer was known for having the most shredded physique in bodybuilding history. I swear he looked like an anatomy chart. But it was his obsession with being ultra lean that cost him his life. Andreas was flushing his body with all sorts of diuretics, steroids, and fat burners, attempting to strip every ounce of fat from his body. But what he didn't realize is how he's stressing his organs to the max. And before I tell you what happened next, did you know his steroid cycle was also known as the death cycle? It's true. Andreas gave his body no rest as he took things to the limit for that paper-thin skin and stripped-down muscles. Unfortunately, Munzer suffered a horrifying end in 1996, passing away at just 31 years old because of a liver and kidney shutdown. His autopsy was like something out of a horror movie, as his organs were hard like rock with his blood thick as syrup. Give it up for the man who changed bodybuilding forever, Dorian Yates. Before Dorian took the main stage, bodybuilding wasn't exactly about size. It had more to do with aesthetics. But Yates came in bigger, freakier, and leaner than anyone else before, cementing himself as a legend, with 6 Mr. Olympia won from 1992 to 1997. It was actually Yates who popularized high-intensity training, also known as HIIT. Unlike other professional bodybuilders, Dorian would only train 4 days per week, but his sets were so extreme that they'd leave him vomiting and unable to move. And what about drug usage? Hardcore. All those stimulants gave him that temporary edge, but it pretty much destroyed his body as he suffered from torn biceps, ripped triceps, and a career-ending lat tear. During an interview, Dorian actually admitted once that he went too far. Do you know someone else who went too far? Tom Platz, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be controversial, but I think Tom Platz had the best legs in bodybuilding history. It would be an understatement to say his leg workouts were from hell. Platz would literally squat 500 pounds for over 20 reps. You heard that right. Over 20 reps. His leg workouts would often leave even the toughest bodybuilders crying or puking. The interesting bit? Platz claims he never used steroids. Sure, bud. I mean, he didn't have to admit it since it was pretty much an open secret in the sport. And his body didn't lie either, as he suffered from chronic knee pain, torn muscles, and long-term joint issues. Plus, there's no way you're doing abusive 4-hour-long leg workouts without taking some sort of stimulants. Ready to see one of the weirdest, most deformed bodybuilders ever? Greg Valentino, a bodybuilder who's gone through pretty much everything in the book. A cancer diagnosis, horror throat surgery, and exploding biceps. Greg has seen it all. Throughout the years, not even a single bodybuilder has been able to compete with his ridiculous steroid use. He's openly admitted to injecting insane amounts of steroids and Synthol directly into his arms, leading to nasty swelling and unnatural lumps. The consequence? Disaster. His 28-inch biceps ended up exploding due to an injected abscess, forcing him to drain pus from his own arms using a syringe. He also can't stop talking about that massive scar on his arm and how it makes him super insecure. Come on, dude. You almost lost your arms, and the scar is all you care about? Next up, we have a bodybuilder who went from a rising star to a murderer. You heard that right. A murderer. Meet Craig Titus, a hardcore and aggressive bodybuilder known for pushing his body to the limit. He's admitted to using testosterone, GHG, and more, all in insane doses, to maintain his massive frame. But it's not his body that makes him famous in the bodybuilding scene. He's actually famous for ditching a solid career only for drugs, crime, and eventually murder. Titus and his wife, fitness competitor Kelly Ryan, became addicted to drugs like meth and ecstasy. The couple was abusing behind the scenes, and then came the ultimate downfall. Both of them were arrested for the murder of their personal assistant, Melissa James. The police report states that the couple tortured Melissa for several hours, killed her, stuffed her body in a car, and set it on fire. Titus was sentenced to 55 years in prison, and it's kind of ironic how this guy was a monster, both inside and outside the gym. Morale of the story? Don't do drugs, kids, even if they're just steroids. Big Lenny, anyone? Chances are you might not even know this guy because of bodybuilding. Believe it or not, he's actually an internet meme. Famous for his massive, bloated physique, Big Lenny is undoubtedly one of the most bizarre figures in bodybuilding. But what makes him so controversial? Well, let's just say he doesn't exactly follow the traditional diet. He's consumed insane amounts of fast food, junk, and mass gainer shakes, showing off his whatever-it-takes mentality. And then there's his insane drug use. Lenny openly admits to taking nearly every steroid imaginable, along with the usual insulin and GHG. But it doesn't end there. He's also taken experimental compounds. I mean, the idea of putting something inside your body without knowing what it can do is just crazy. His body is pretty much destroyed now as he struggles with organ growth, poor heart health, and serious medical issues. But even though he's on the brink of losing his life, he still continued to load up, ultimately losing his life at 60. Since we're on the topic of chasing size, who better than the mad scientist of bodybuilding, Tony Huge? This dude isn't a bodybuilder. He's a self-proclaimed human lab rat willing to experiment with every PED out there. And Tony isn't secretive about it either. He does it for the views, broadcasting his drug experiments to the world. His training is actually secondary to his drug use since he mainly lifts to push the limits of chemical enhancements. He doesn't even follow a diet or anything, often testing the effects of fast food, extreme bulking, and untested supplements on his physique. Some of the things he takes aren't even approved for human use. Now, as far as Tony's thought process is concerned, he believes he's biohacking the body. I don't know about that, Tony. I'd probably stop while I still have the chance. Or his life might end up awfully similar to Art Atwood's. This guy was a mass monster known for his incredibly freakish size and shredded physique, packing on over 300 pounds of pure muscle. In retrospect, Art did pretty much everything to somehow cover his extreme steroid use. He would often talk about consuming over 10,000 calories per day, along with some of the craziest cheat meals ever. I still remember there was a point in time when people actually thought he was a natty bodybuilder, gifted with superior genetics. All that changed, though, when he suffered a heart attack in 2011, passing away at just 37 years old. The reason? PEDs. And in case you're wondering, here's what you look like after 25 years of steroid abuse. Rich Piana was larger than life, literally and figuratively. At over 300 pounds of muscle, the internet sensation was known for his brutal honesty about steroids and his extreme lifestyle. SARMs, GHG, test, anabolics. You name it, and Rich has done it. There are even some videos of him using his signature feeder workouts, where he'd pump out hundreds of reps to force growth. I don't know about you, but that's just physical torture at this point. But what was he even expecting? Almost everyone who's tried to defy nature by getting too big has suffered the same exact fate. And so did Rich, as he passed away at just 46 years old, suffering from a drug-related heart failure. I saved the best for last, people. The one and only Koll Teres, the Synthol Nightmare. Better known as Popeye, Koll took bodybuilding to a horrifying extreme. Instead of natural training, he pumped liters of Synthol into his arms, turning them into swollen balloons that looked more like tumors than actual muscles. And want to know his ridiculous training regime? Spoiler alert, he doesn't have one. Unlike real bodybuilders, Koll skipped all the hard work and went straight for the shortcut that backfired horribly. The doctors begged him to stop, warning him that his arms would rot from the inside, but Koll refused. At the end, he had to undergo multiple surgeries to remove chunks of dead flesh from his arms. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. So what do you think? Which bodybuilder do you think broke all limits to achieve the perfect look? And should PEDs be banned? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more interesting videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.